So we're in our last and final week of our three-part Relentless preaching series. This morning I want to do four things. Impressive, the crazy reality, two wrong beliefs that we have about this crazy reality, and then a response. So first, God is impressive. First reading today, we hear from the book of Wisdom. This passage begins with the goal of emphasizing God's splendor. It's meant to invoke in us a sense of wonder and awe towards God. It mentions that compared with God, the universe is a grain in a balance, or it's a drop of dew on a grass. The universe. Just pause there. Like, do you know how big the universe is? Like, if you want to freak yourself out, go on YouTube later and just type in a scale of the universe. And just get ready to get freaked out. The universe is 93 billion light years across. And that's just the observable universe. And by the way, the universe, as I'm talking right now, it's expanding. Scientists, their best guess is that there's somewhere between 200 and 300 billion galaxies in the universe. We oftentimes think that we're in the Milky Way galaxy, that we're in the center of the universe. There's 200 to 300 billion galaxies, all of which have somewhere around 100 billion stars. And we're talking stars just in our galaxy that are larger than we can comprehend. I've mentioned before in a homily that there's a star in our galaxy named the Big Dog Star, of which you can fit 7 quadrillion planet Earths inside this one star in our galaxy. It takes 31 million years to count to a quadrillion. And you can fit 7 quadrillion planet Earths inside the star. And that's just one of these stars in our galaxy, let alone the 200 to 300 billion other galaxies in the universe. So the point of the book of Wisdom here, starting this passage, is to say that the universe, right, like the universe is just a drop of dew on a grass compared to God. That is to say, God is impressive. And as difficult it is for us to grasp how impressive God is, I've come to learn in just 2 years as a priest that most people have a more difficult time grasping something else about God. And that is how relentless He is. Specifically, how relentlessly God pursues you and me. We hear this encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus in the gospel today, and we're led to think that this encounter happens because Zacchaeus is seeking out Jesus. We read that he couldn't see him because of the crowd, so he ran ahead of the crowd. He climbed a sycamore tree so that he could see Jesus. But our theology of grace is one that understands that God is always the one who acts first. God is always the initiator. So the gospel starts off and says that Jesus came to Jericho and intended to pass through the town. So it almost sounds as if that there's just this chance encounter between Jesus and Zacchaeus. No. God created the universe. So He knew Zacchaeus. He knew everything about him. He knew he was living in this sinful lifestyle. He knew all his faults, that he just couldn't seem to overcome or to stop. He knew all his insecurities, all of his wounds. He knew it all. So God pursued him. Because God's love compels a pursuit. He's constantly desiring us to bring us into communion with him. And for most of us, the idea that God relentlessly pursues me is a really hard thing to understand and grasp for many different reasons, but let me just name two. First, we tend to believe that God changes his mind. There's a young woman who came to see me. She struggled with a particular sin, and for years the cycle of sin persisted over and over. And it led her to be in this perpetual state of mind of just beating herself up. She became so accustomed over the years of beating herself up that she was in this mindset that she just wasn't good. And she wasn't loved. At one point she said, "Father Mark, I know that God has grown tired of me." In other words, saying that she knows that God has given up his pursuit of her. And it's easy for us to think this way. But hear this. God never changes his mind about you. Ever. Regardless of how big of a failure we think we are, or the rut that we're in, God never says, like I'm so sick of him. Like, why does he keep doing that? I wish he would just fix himself so then, we could be in a relationship. See, he only pursues more. He only draws more near. And that's the very thing that heals. Jesus' pursuit is what transforms us and is what brings about change. God does not change his mind about you or me. He's relentless. And the second thing that we tend to believe wrongly about God's pursuit is that we think that God forgets about us. We think that he just takes time off of pursuing us. Like we go through seasons of our lives, and maybe we're in one now where a particular time of suffering and illness or trial in our life, where God just seems like he's miles and miles away. He doesn't care. If he really did care, this wouldn't be happening to me right now. Or I wouldn't feel this way right now if he did care. Clearly, God has higher priorities than me. And for someone to come along then and say, God relentlessly pursues you, we're like, yeah, right, show me. Like, prove that to me. Prove to me that God relentlessly pursues me. For me, just this past week of just feeling down, somewhat depressed this past week, I was dealing with a number of different things, a combination of things, and some things that were just touching on an insecurity that I have about myself. And on top of all that, it was like the first day that I realized that it was cold. Like, it was snowing. There was no sun. I felt as if God was miles away. I was down. I didn't feel loved. I felt alone. And it was on Thursday, Father Don and I, we came back to the rectory for lunch. As I'm preparing something for lunch, Father Don asked me how I was doing, and I told him that I was in a bad mood. I told him that I felt down, that I felt depressed. And he asked me if I've related that to Jesus yet. And I said, no, actually I haven't. And I need to do that before I go back in the office. I need to stop into the chapel and do that. And so I did that, and I'm kneeling right here in the chapel. My arms are kind of resting over the back of the chair out like this. And as my arms are kind of resting on the back of one of the backs of the chair, my eyes are closed. All of a sudden I feel someone take my right hand. And of course, upon that, I open my eyes. And as I open my eyes, I see this woman kiss my hand. And she leaves outside this back door. And as soon as the door shuts behind her, I'm alone here kneeling. There's other people here in the chapel. And when I'm praying with my eyes closed, I just get this image of this woman's face as she kisses my hand. And I felt the Lord say to me, Mark, you have no idea how much I love you, how near I am to you, how much I'm pursuing you right now. I was just overcome with emotion, just feeling God's love, and like healed. Like I was healed on the spot of just being overcome with that reality of God's love for me. And that's the reality all the time, that he's here all the time. That he hasn't taken time off of pursuing. And God revealing himself to us like that happens all the time. Not being kissed on the hand by random women. That doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen to me all the time either. Let's make that clear, okay? Like certain customs, like people kiss the hands of priests. We got that clear, okay? It happens all the time, but we aren't quiet enough. We aren't aware enough. God does not take time off. He never forgets about you or me. He's relentless. And lastly, God's relentless pursuit requires a response. It required a response in Zacchaeus, and it requires a response in you and me. And the response is simply this: to surrender to God's pursuit. For some of us here, that's going to mean, like Zacchaeus, a reorientating our life. A repentance that involves inviting Jesus into my life and resolving that here on out now, my life too is going to change. For some of us, it's going to be just coming down from the tree, hearing the call of the one who pursues, beckoning us, wanting to come into our house. So this week, go on YouTube. Today, go on YouTube. Type in and see that scale of the universe, or go outside at night and look up into the sky and see the stars and consider how ridiculously massive the universe is. And allow yourself to say, God, you are impressive. And then just pause and realize that the one who made the universe is right now pursuing you. And despite what sometimes I think, he never changes his mind about me. And he never just takes time off from his pursuit. Because God is relentless.